Coming up next, I got the story of a Chicago kid who grew up in recording studios watching his jingle-writing father work like a madman. For years, he stayed in the shadows, though, singing backup for superstars and writing powerhouse hits for other artists. And he spent his 20s as a session singer, quietly honing his craft and paying his dues, trying to make it as a singer. He believed he could be a superstar. In fact, super producer David Foster, he told him he'd never make it as a singer. But he proved him wrong, dead wrong. He finally stepped into the spotlight in the late 80s and exploded. 7 top 5 hits on the Billboard charts, then 7 more top 20 hits in the early 90s. He was a repeat chart offender who became one of the most successful pop songwriters of his era. So how did this kid go from singing backup to dominating the airwaves? We're going to get straight from him. He's our guest today on our latest edition of Short and Sweet. And man, it's a great one coming up. Some hilarious stories. Hey, music junkies, let's get straight into this week's edition of Short and Sweet. We'll recover the legends, the icons, their careers, and their top 3 songs, and I try to do it in 10 minutes or less. Let's see how we do. Now, in this episode, we're telling the story of the man who soundtracked every prom and homecoming dance, at least in the late 80s and early 90s. He kept Def Leppard's Pour Some Sugar on Me from claiming #1 in 88. And he actually became the first solo artist to have his first 7 singles reach the top 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. The man, Richard Marx, one of the most successful pop rockers of the late 80s and early 90s. From 1987 to 1989, he reeled off 7 top 5 hits on the Hot 100. And in the 90s, he added 7 more that reached the top 20. Here's a couple of them. Do you remember this hair? Born in Chicago in 1963, Richard Marx grew up surrounded by music. His father, Dick Marx, was a successful jingle writer and commercial producer. And Richard started singing on his dad's ad spots at the age of 5. And by his teens, Richard was a professional session singer, lending his voice to commercials while learning studio craft from the inside. After graduating high school, Richard moved to LA to pursue music seriously. He landed work as a session vocalist, singing on hit records for some of the biggest stars of the 80s. Lionel Richie, Whitney Houston, and Madonna, to name a few. But Richard wasn't content with being a voice in the background. He was writing his own songs and pitching them to established acts. Actually, in 1984, he co-wrote What About Me? That became a hit for Kenny Rogers. Oh, what about me? He provided material for Chicago and Vixen and Freddie Jackson. And he built a reputation as a songwriter who understood how to craft radio-ready hooks, as well as anybody in the late 80s, it would come to prove. Now, by the mid-80s, Richard Marx had proven himself as both a vocalist and a songwriter. It was time to step out front. In 1987, EMI Manhattan Records released his self-titled debut album, Richard Marx. The lead single, Don't Mean Nothing, shot to #3, with the help of a couple of Eagles, including Joe Walsh and Randy Meisner. But it was a great rocker that showed us the rock side of Marx, which I always loved. Then came Shoulda Known Better, another top 3 hit, great song. His third single, Endless Summer Nights, reached #2 in early 88. And this was one that was rejected by every record label in the business. Richard had some sweet revenge there. And he was told by super producer David Foster, a hero of his, that he'd never make it as a singer, that he should just write songs for others. Here's Richard on that.
I always thought, I know I can make a living in the music business, and I'd be happy, I'd be fine to do that. And so I was right about that point when I thought, I'm just gonna dedicate myself to songwriting and behind the scenes and give all this up. Plus, at that time, David Foster had told me I'd never make it as an artist. And I looked up to him so much, and that was something that, in the moment, fueled my thinking of bailing. But in retrospect, I think it was maybe the pivotal moment of me going, I was going to show him that he was wrong.
In the late 80s, Richard Marx was everywhere. His face was on MTV, and his voice was dominating top 40 radio. But man, 1988 and 1989, that was Richard's peak season. Hold On to the Nights became his first #1 hit in the summer of '88. His sophomore LP, Repeat Offender, it dropped on April 26, 1989, and with it came 2 more #1s, Satisfied and Right Here Waiting. For a fleeting moment, Richard Marx was one of the biggest stars in popular music. '89, he owned that year. In the '90s, the music landscape shifted dramatically, of course. Grunge and alternative rock overshadowed balladeers and pop rock like Richard Marx. But he continued making music and had great success. In fact, his 1991 album, Rush Street, might be his best. It went platinum with AC #1 hits, Keep Coming Back and Hazard. Later in 1994, the ballad Now and Forever from the Getaway soundtrack in his album Paid Vacation, it dominated adult contemporary radio. It spent 11 weeks at #1 on that chart. Now and forever. But, the massive pop stardom of the late 80s, that was coming to a close. So, Richard Marx, he reinvented himself, and really, great. He became a gun for hire, an in-demand songwriter and producer. In 1999, he started his own label, Signal 21, taking control of his career in new ways. And he's continued to release albums long into the new millennium. And I gotta say, he's one of the funniest guys I've ever interviewed. Richard Marx's peak was a bit brief, but during those golden years from '87 to '91, few artists burned brighter. His voice became synonymous with romance and heartbreak and the power ballad. It was for an entire generation. Here's my top 3 Richard Marx picks. Coming in at #3, I got the rocker Satisfied. This has one of the most underappreciated riffs of the decade. Here's what Richard said about it.
I was writing songs for the show, and I knew that I wanted to make a more rock record than the first one. And Satisfied was the last song we cut, because everybody agreed that I had a stronger album than the first one. Mm-hmm. But we were really trying to make sure we had that first lead-off track. And I remember just writing 3 songs and letting everybody else pick which one to record, and Satisfied won. Working with all the different musicians, now that I'd had some success, there was really none of my heroes in terms of musicians that I couldn't call up and at least ask to play with me, And they all said yeah. So I was really blessed to have, that kind of cherry picking and be able to go, I want that guitar player on that song, and I want those backup vocals to be on that track, and all the people that you mentioned, So it was, making the Repeat Offender album was a blast. It was just effortless.
Honestly, I have to say, it was tough doing a top 3. It'd be tough doing a top 5. I mean, I love Don't Mean Nothing and Angel Leah and Hazard. But coming in at #2, I've got to go with the slow dance staple, Hold On to the Nights. Hold on to the memories. Now, believe it or not, this was my senior prom theme in the middle of the '90s. They still chose this one. It was still big. And it held Def Leppard out of #1 and still has such a powerful vocal. Here's Richard on the track.
I was sitting at the piano and the riff fell out. The music came really quickly, and I knew that as I was writing the music that it could be this big rock power ballad that was so popular at the time. And then I thought, wait a minute, what if I don't do that until the last minute, if at all? At first, I wasn't going to do it at all. And then I thought, no, it might be cool to really just go and go and go and keep it right here and right here, right here, and then explode at the end with the big power. Boom, boom, do, 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 do. Yeah, so it became a really fun lesson in dynamics. So I produced it that way on purpose, and my record company, A&R people, were like, nothing happens until 3 minutes into the song. The radio people are going, you're coming off of Endless Summer Nights, #2 single, And they all wanted me to go in and do this new version that was a paint by numbers. And I said, no, then just pick another song, or well, let's just wrap it up and we'll do another album, you know? But I said, this is the way I hear this song. This is what I want it to be. And so they went with it. And I think that was one, again, it didn't sound like anything else on the radio at that time.
And here it is, my #1 Richard Marx pick, and you had to go with this one, Right Here Waiting.
You've got me going crazy.
Every 80s kid knows how to play this one on the piano, and we might, the cool guys in us would act like it was below us, but beneath us, but let's be honest, this was that song that we all loved. And Richard has a funny take on this one. From Barbra Streisand loving it, but turning it down because he wouldn't change the lyrics to it being the #1 song on Valentine's Day every year. But Spotify, they pay him pennies for it. Here's what he said.
I was actually reading an article the other day that Spotify said that it is the #1 love song on Spotify.
Really?
And Valentine's Day, they did a little thing about what are the most played love songs, and it was the top.
Wow. And yet it probably wouldn't make me enough to even refill that glass of Perrier. It's the #1 love song on Spotify, but you don't.
But you'll make about 32 cents
exactly.
from it.
And I slowly go insane.
As I'm starting to make the Repeat Offender album, people are going, well, you're going to do that song Right Here Waiting, right? I was like, no, it's too personal and it doesn't fit the album. The album's a rock record and it's too mellow. I remember at that time, Barbra Streisand asked me to write her a song, and I met with her, and she was really complimentary, and so I thought, oh, that's right. Right Here Waiting is perfect for her. So I sent it to her, and she called me and said, thank you. This music, the melody is so beautiful, but I'm going to need you to rewrite the lyrics because I'm not going to be right here waiting for anybody. It's true. So I went, no, I'm not going to rewrite the lyrics. It's too personal.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. What are your memories of Richard Marx and these great songs? What are your top 5 or top 3 from Richard Marx? I'll tell you what, I think he's one of the great pop songwriters of the late 80s and early 90s. And he's such an entertaining guy. Let's have a great discussion below. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.